Hi guys, welcome to this video. My name is Job Toebos, and during these videos I will teach you how to program online accessible experiments in matters of hours. It will be a comprehensive step-by-step guide and is specifically developed for beginners in programming. Before we start with the course, I think it's very useful to give you an overview of the entire course. The video you are currently watching is video 1 and belongs to chapter 1 of the course, the introduction. It will take about 30 minutes and I will teach you some general things about programming and I will learn you what the Neurotask software is. After the introduction, we go to chapter 2, in which we will be programming our first experiment together. After we finish with chapter 2, we continue with chapter 3, in which I will show you how to continue programming in Neurotask and how to use more complex functions. So, let's see. An overview of the introduction. So, we will start with part 1, in which I will teach you for who this course is, what you will learn, and why, in my opinion, it's so useful to use the Neurotask software. Then we go to part 2, in which I will teach you some general things about programming and I will give you a small introduction on programming in Neurotask. After that we continue with part 3, in which I will show you some useful additional resources which can be very useful during the rest of this course. So let's continue. Part 1. For who is this course? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the course is developed specifically for beginners in programming. This means there's no prior experience in programming needed to start with this course. Secondly, it will be a step-by-step course and we won't skip any necessary elements to develop your first experiment. And at last, I think it's a good way to start with programming. A lot of jobs, or nowadays jobs, do require some programming experience or at least a little programming knowledge. So I think it's very useful if you want to develop your skills in programming. For what types of discipline is this course? Well, I think it's especially used for psychology students. However, it could also be beneficial for marketing students, since an experiment could also be replaced with a survey. And it doesn't actually matter your level of research, so whether you're a student or a PhD or a professor. I actually don't think it matters to which of these levels you belong. I think it's especially important that you want to learn how to create either experiments or surveys and want to do this in a minimal amount of time. So what will you learn during this course? Well, you won't only learn knowledge, but you will learn skills and knowledge. So you will learn some general programming knowledge. I will teach you some basic JavaScript functions. And I will teach you how to write script for experiments. However, it will also be a work-along course, so you will learn how to create your own experiments and surveys, which will be highly customizable, online accessible, and finished in a matter of hours. So then we continue with the question, why Neurotask? Why should you use this specific software? Well, I think I can explain you this the best way with an example. So imagine you want to use the 15-word memory test and you did a power analysis and you need to test at least 50 participants. This means that you will have 3 options in my opinion. The first one is plan A. The classic manual testing of subjects. This is the way how psychology research has been conducted for the past 50 years. So, if you want to conduct the 15-word memory test on 50 participants, yes? So, let's have a look what we need to do before we can start analyzing the data. We need to find these participants. We need to make appointments. We need to find and hire a testing locations. Then we need to test these 50 participants on the specific time that the participants are available. And after we done this, we need to score 50 answer sheets and then manually add all these scores to an Excel sheet. I think if you want to do this fast and you have spend full-time working on this project, I think it will cost you at least a week to conduct this and an investment of 500 euros. However, there's also other ways you could test these participants, for instance, on the internet, which will be Plan B. Create a website and conduct an online experiment. However, if we want to use Plan B, we first need to build this website. And you cannot just start programming a website. No, you first need to learn about this website and then you need to learn how to programming for these. Well, if you've learned all these things, you need to start with programming your actual website. After you've programmed your website, you need to define a database for your specific experiment. And if you're done with that, you can start programming the actual experiment. This will take quite some time. I think at least 3 months of full-time work if you want to do all these things by yourself. However, at the end, you could send the link to friends or family in just 1 minute and everything will be automatically corrected and transformed into Excel sheets. This will only cost a couple of milliseconds. So, yeah, I think if you want to test like 10,000 subjects, this could be a useful option for you. But if you need to test 50 participants, I think this is definitely not the way to go. However, there's luckily also a plan C. Use Neurotask. Well, the good thing about Neurotask is that all the first steps about learning and create are already done for you. So the only thing you need to do is program an actual experiment, which I will teach you in chapter 2 of this course, and then send the link to friends and family, and then just download the Excel sheet. So if you use Neurotask, you could be finished in a matter of hours with almost no cost. And that is specifically the goal of the Neurotask software. However, before we continue with the Neurotask software, I think it's useful to teach you some general things about programming. So, what is actually a script? Well, I think it's the easiest if you compare a script for an experiment with the recipe for a meal. So, if you look with me at the top line over here, yes? So we want to make a fairly easy meal, which will be a toastie. For that we need some materials, namely 2 pieces of bread and 1 slice of cheese. Then we need some instructions. So put the cheese between the bread and put in the toaster for 10 minutes. And then we need some kind of performer. Which in this case will be a chef or a cooking machine, which will perform the instructions on the materials to create the product, a toastie. Well, if we would compare this with an experiment, it's actually just the same. We would have 2 stimuli. The instructions would be show image 1 or 2 and repeat this for 10 times. And then our performer will be Neurotask. So this is the software that's going to read these instructions to create your experiment. So let's see. We need to write these instructions in a specific language. And there are many types of programming languages. I think some of you are might familiar with the MATLAB programming software, which is used a lot for academic purposes. And is used to make mathematical calculations. Another type of software that I used a lot during my study psychobiology was the R programming language. which is specifically developed for statistics and econometrics and is also very useful in data processing. Well, and then we continue to the software we are going to use, namely JavaScript. And JavaScript is one of the languages that is used to build web pages. So you might have heard of HTML or CSS, in which HTML defines where information is shown on a page. Yes, so HTML would, for instance, say that this is the header of the current page and that we want the text over here. And then what is actually JavaScript? JavaScript is used to make your website interactive. So for instance, let's say I would have a button over here to press back and press forward. That is typically done with JavaScript. And JavaScript is used in almost all websites, if not all websites, and it is read by your browser. So this means that the instructions are read by, for instance, your browser you're currently using. This might be Chrome or Internet Explorer, Safari, etc., etc. But this is very useful because since we are constructing our instructions in the JavaScript language, your participant, his browser, for instance Chrome, can read our experiment and thus conduct or perform the instructions. So then we continue with the next question. What is actually Neurotask? Well, Neurotask is a framework that is built to greatly reduce the difficulty and the complexity of scripting. So this means that the code for Neurotask is in general way easier compared to the code of normal JavaScript. And an example I can give you is that Neurotask does automatic size adjustment for you. So normally if you would have a web page and you have a large image, you would need to compress this image, make it smaller, and then tell I want to show the image at the middle of my screen. In Neurotask, these functions are automatically performing these adjustments for you. So at Neurotask, we can easily just say show image, and then the Neurotask software will automatically reduce the size of the image in the right format that is the best for your experiment. And this is just one of the numerous examples that Neurotask reduces the complexity of your script. Besides that, Neurotask is very feasible. It's free to use, and you can do the scripting of your experiments online, but also the testing of participants online. And at last, a good thing about Neurotask is that it's compatible with almost all browsers and almost all devices, for instance your desktop, laptop, smartphone, tablet, and there are also several export options. So, I think we are almost ready to start programming our first experiment together. However, before I want to start with the course, I think it's very useful to show you some additional resources. So, if you want to know something about the functions that are used, you can look them up at this link. It's leanpub.com/neurotask/read. And this book is specifically developed to describe all the unique Neurotask function. And I think this will be your primary source of help during this course. In addition, there are also some demos available at the Neurotask software. These are already prefabricated experiments that you could directly use or slightly modify in order to create your own experiment. I think it's also useful to show you guys where you can find your stimuli, and I've just added one of the numerous websites where you can get a nice list of words of images, which is called random list. So for instance, you want to have 10 pictures of animals in your experiments, you just go to this website, then you type in category animals that you want 10 images, And then random list will produce 10 random images of animals for you. The last resources I want to show you are W3 Schools and Stack Overflow. In the beginning, you won't need these resources because they're fairly difficult compared to the Neurotask book. But if you want to create more complex experiments when you continue programming in a Neurotask environment, I think these are really useful resources because there's a lot of questions answered on these websites which can help you with creating an experiment. Well, almost finished. The last thing we need to do is create an account. So we can just click this link or go to scripting.neurotask.com/user/register new. And over here you're gonna fill in your name, etc., etc., and your first account will be created. Well, that was it for this video. Good job, guys. We already finished with the introduction in about 20 minutes, I think. Very good. I hope to see you guys at chapter 2, which will be the next video.